The scent of rosewood shavings clung to my fingertips even after 3 washings. My hands trembled slightly as I tied the black apron around my waist, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar against my work-worn jeans. The elegant dining room of Il Sogno stretched before me like foreign territory, all cream linens and crystal chandeliers that refracted light into 1,000 tiny rainbows across polished silverware. "Table 7 needs water, and don't forget the wine list for 12, Vivian whispered as she breezed past me with practiced efficiency, her arms loaded with plates that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You're doing great for your first night." I nodded, though my stomach churned with anxiety. This wasn't my world. My world smelled of wood glue and lacquer, of centuries-old crafting traditions passed down through generations of luthiers. My world was the cramped workshop 3 blocks from here, where I spent 14-hour days coaxing music from maple and spruce, transforming raw timber into violins that would outlive us all. My world was dying. The bank letter sat folded in my pocket, its contents burned into my memory. 30 days to settle the outstanding loan or face foreclosure. 6 years of work, of sacrifice, of pouring every dollar and dream into that workshop, about to vanish because I'd been naive enough to believe passion could overcome economics. "Clara, move." Vincent's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. The restaurant owner gestured sharply toward the entrance where new patrons were arriving. "Section 4 is yours tonight, those 3 tables by the window." I grabbed menus and forced myself to focus. Vivian had called in sick, leaving the restaurant short-staffed on one of their busiest nights. When she'd begged me to cover, mentioning the $200 in tips I could expect, I'd agreed before my pride could object. $200 wouldn't save my workshop, but it would buy me another week to figure something out. The evening shift blurred into a rhythm of taking orders, delivering plates, refilling glasses. My feet ached in the sensible shoes I'd borrowed from Vivian, too small by half a size. The formal attire felt like a costume, transforming me into someone I wasn't, someone whose hands served food instead of shaping beauty from wood. Table 12 caught my attention around 8:30. A couple, both impeccably dressed, though something about the man's clothes struck me as odd. The leather jacket was quality, but worn in ways that suggested actual use rather than designer distress. His jeans were clean but faded from genuine wear, not fashion. Work boots, expensive but practical, peeked from beneath the table's edge. His face held my gaze longer than it should have, handsome in a way that suggested strength rather than polish, with dark hair that curled slightly at the collar and eyes that seemed to catalog everything around him with quiet intensity. There was something dangerous in the set of his shoulders, the way he held himself with coiled readiness even in this peaceful setting. The woman across from him was his opposite in every way. Designer dress that probably cost more than my equipment. Jewelry that caught the light with each calculated gesture. Makeup applied with professional precision. She checked her phone repeatedly, her expression growing increasingly sour. "Excuse me." I approached their table with water glasses. "Good evening. My name is Clara, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. Can I start you with something from the bar?" The woman barely glanced at me. "Champagne. The Veuve Clicquot." "Of course. And for you, sir?" "Just water is fine." His voice was deeper than I expected, with a rough edge that suggested cigarettes or shouting or perhaps both. When his eyes met mine, something flickered there. Assessment, curiosity, something I couldn't quite name. "I'll have that right out for you." As I turned to leave, the woman's voice carried clearly across the space. "Water. Really, Dante? At Il Sogno? Why did I even agree to come here with you?" I pretended not to hear, but my fingers tightened on my tray. There was a cruelty in her tone that made me wince, the kind of casual contempt that came from believing yourself superior to everyone around you. The champagne arrived quickly. I poured carefully, aware of the woman, Sophia I'd heard Dante call her, watching my every move as if looking for a mistake to criticize. When I reached for Dante's water glass to refill it, She waved me away with an irritated gesture. "That's enough hovering. We'll call you when we're ready to order." "Of course. Please take your time looking over the menu." Over the next 20 minutes, I watched their table from my peripheral vision while attending to other guests. The body language told a story. Sophia leaning away, checking her phone constantly, her expression ranging from bored to openly hostile. Dante sat with practiced stillness, speaking occasionally, his words met with either dismissive gestures or no response at all. It was the businessman at table 14 who changed everything. He arrived alone, mid-50s, wearing wealth like a second skin. The Patek Philippe on his wrist could have paid off my workshop loan 3 times over. He ordered the most expensive bottle on our wine list without looking at the price, his voice carrying that particular confidence that comes from never having to consider cost. Sophia noticed him immediately. I was refilling water at table 9 when I saw her lean forward, suddenly animated, catching the businessman's eye with a practiced smile. Within minutes, she'd manufactured a reason to walk past his table, then stop to compliment his watch. The conversation that followed made my skin crawl with its transparent calculation. Dante watched it all with that same dangerous stillness, his expression never changing, but something in his eyes went cold and flat. "Excuse me, waitress." Sophia's voice rang out across the dining room, loud enough to draw attention from nearby tables. "I need to speak with management. Now." Vincent appeared with remarkable speed, his professional smile firmly in place. "Is there a problem, madam?" "Yes, actually." Sophia gestured toward Dante, who remained seated, his face unreadable. I was under the impression this was a high-class establishment. Instead, I find myself dining with. She paused, her lip curling with distaste. "Essentially a mechanic. Look at him. Those clothes. Those hands." She laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. I don't know what I was thinking. The restaurant had gone quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence as people turned to watch. I stood frozen, my tray clutched to my chest, rage and embarrassment warring in my throat, though neither the humiliation nor the anger were mine to claim. Dante stood slowly, with that same coiled grace I'd noticed earlier. He pulled out his wallet and placed several bills on the table, far more than their order would have cost. "For the trouble?" he said quietly to Vincent, then turned to Sophia. "I hope you find what you're looking for." "Oh, I already have." Sophia's gaze cut to the businessman, who was watching the scene with amused interest. Someone who can actually afford a woman like me. Someone with class. She stood, smoothed her dress, and without another glance at Dante, walked to table 14. The businessman, clearly entertained by the drama, gestured for her to join him. She slid into the chair Dante had just vacated, her laugh carrying across the suddenly uncomfortable silence. Dante stood there for a moment, his expression giving nothing away, then walked toward the exit. As he passed my station, our eyes met briefly. In that instant, I saw past the carefully controlled exterior to the hurt beneath, not at Sophia's rejection, but at the cruelty of her method, the public spectacle she'd made of her contempt. Something in my chest twisted sharply. "Wait!" The word escaped before I could stop it. He paused, turning slightly. "Your dessert. You paid for a full meal. Please, at least take something with you." Vincent shot me a warning look, but I ignored him, already moving to the kitchen. I grabbed one of our best desserts, tiramisu plated beautifully, and returned to find Dante still standing there, confusion flickering across his features. "On the house," I said softly, holding out the plate. "Everyone deserves kindness, especially after an evening like that." He took the plate, his fingers brushing mine briefly. "Thank you. I'm sorry that happened to you. You didn't deserve it. You don't know me." His voice was careful, guarded. "Maybe I did, No one deserves to be humiliated like that, no matter who they are or what they've done. I met his gaze steadily. Cruelty is a choice, and she chose it deliberately. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. What's your name? Clara. Thank you, Clara, for the kindness. He glanced at the tiramisu, then back at me. Though I suspect this cost you more than just a dessert. He was right. I could feel Vincent's disapproving stare boring into my back, but I didn't regret it. Some things are worth the cost. Dante nodded slowly, as if filing that statement away for later consideration. Then he left, taking the dessert and leaving me standing in the middle of Il Sogno's elegant dining room, my heart beating strangely fast, wondering why I'd just risked my evening's wages for a man whose name I barely knew. The rest of my shift passed in a blur. Vincent docked my pay for the dessert, exactly as I'd expected, leaving me with barely enough to cover my bus fare home. Sophia and the businessman ordered champagne and appetizers, their laughter carrying across the dining room like broken glass. I served them with professional detachment, accepting the businessman's generous tip while ignoring Sophia's smug expression. It was nearly midnight when I finally untied my apron and stepped out into the cool night air. My feet throbbed, my back ached, and I smelled of garlic and wine instead of wood shavings and varnish. The workshop keys hung heavy in my pocket. 30 days, the letter had said. 30 days to come up with $70,000 or lose everything. I started walking toward the bus stop, too tired to think about solutions that didn't exist. A sleek black car pulled up beside me, moving so quietly I didn't hear it until it was there. The window rolled down, revealing Dante in the driver's seat, still wearing that worn leather jacket, still radiating that same dangerous calm. Clara. Not a question, a statement, as if he'd been waiting for me. Can I give you a ride? Every instinct screamed caution. I didn't know this man. Didn't know anything about him except that he'd been humiliated by a woman who judged him by his clothes and apparently found him wanting. That's kind of you, but I'm fine. The bus stop is just 3 blocks, at this hour, in this neighborhood. He nodded toward the darkened street ahead. Please, let me repay the kindness. Something in his tone, in the way he sat perfectly still, waiting for my decision without pressure or expectation, made me trust him more than I should have. Or perhaps I was just too exhausted to care about caution anymore. All right. Thank you. The car's interior smelled of leather and something else. Cologne, expensive but subtle. As I settled into the passenger seat, I noticed details I'd missed in the restaurant. The car itself was understated but clearly costly. His hands on the wheel were scarred and calloused, working hands despite the expensive vehicle. Where to? I gave him my address, then immediately regretted it. Too late now. The car pulled smoothly into traffic, moving through the late-night streets with practiced ease. I never got to eat that tiramisu, Dante said after a few moments of silence. I sat in this car for an hour just looking at it, thinking about what you said, about cruelty being a choice, about some things being worth the cost. He glanced at me briefly before returning his attention to the road. You meant it. Most people would have stayed silent, protected themselves. You risked your job for a stranger. It was just dessert. It was more than that. His voice held certainty. It was proof that not everyone in this city has forgotten how to be human. We drove in silence for a while, the city lights blurring past the windows. I should have felt uncomfortable, trapped in an enclosed space with a man I didn't know. Instead, I felt oddly peaceful, the exhaustion of the evening settling into my bones. Can I ask you something? Dante's voice broke the quiet. What do you do when you're not serving tables at Il Sogno? I make violins. The words came automatically, before I could consider whether sharing personal information was wise. I'm a luthier. I have a workshop on Maple Street. His hands tightened briefly on the steering wheel, the only sign of surprise. A luthier. So those calluses on your fingers? From wood and tools, not waiting tables. Tonight was a favor for a friend. I looked down at my hands, at the permanent marks of my trade. Though I may need to find more shifts like that soon. Why? The question was gentle but direct. I found myself answering despite my better judgment. Perhaps because exhaustion had stripped away my usual defenses, or perhaps because something about this stranger made me feel like truth was safe. The bank is foreclosing on my workshop. 30 days to come up with $70,000 or lose everything I've built. That's a significant amount. 6 years of my life. My voice cracked slightly. Every penny I could save went into equipment, into wood, into learning from masters who were willing to teach me. And now it's over because I was naive enough to believe craftsmanship mattered more than profit margins. It does matter. His voice held conviction, just not to banks. The car pulled up outside my building, a modest structure in a neighborhood that had seen better decades. Dante shut off the engine, turning to face me fully for the first time since we'd started driving. Clara, I need to be honest with you about something. My heart began to beat faster, warning signals firing in my exhausted brain. What? Tonight wasn't an accident. Sophia and I, that whole scene at the restaurant, I orchestrated it. I wanted to see who she really was when she thought I had nothing to offer. He held my gaze steadily. I'm not a mechanic. I'm not poor. And I'm not looking for sympathy. Then what are you looking for? Someone real. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, extending it toward me. Someone who shows kindness without calculation, who creates beauty because it matters, not because it's profitable. Someone who risks their evening's wages for a stranger's dignity. I took the card with trembling fingers. Dante Volkov, it read. CEO, Volkov Enterprises. Below that, a phone number and an address in the city's most exclusive district. I don't understand. I have a proposition for you, Clara. His voice was steady, his dark eyes never leaving mine. Come to my office tomorrow at noon. Let me explain what I'm offering. And if you say no, I'll never contact you again. You have my word. What kind of proposition? A slight smile touched his lips, the first real expression I'd seen cross his face all evening. The kind that could save your workshop and change both our lives. But I need to explain it properly, not in a car at midnight when you're exhausted. Every rational instinct told me to refuse, to thank him for the ride and disappear into my building, to never think about Dante Volkov again. But I looked at that card, at the address that probably led to an office worth more than my entire workshop, and I thought about 30 days and $70,000 and 6 years of my life about to vanish into bankruptcy. Noon tomorrow? I'll send a car, same one. The driver's name is Roman. He's worked for me for 10 years. You'll be completely safe, I promise. I nodded, pocketing the card, then reached for the door handle. Before stepping out, I turned back. Dante? That test you ran tonight, with Sophia. Did you get your answer? I did. His expression hardened slightly. I learned that I'd wasted 6 months on someone who loved my wallet more than anything else. But I also learned something unexpected. What? That there are still people in the city worth knowing, worth trusting. His gaze held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Thank you for reminding me of that, Clara. I climbed out of the car and walked to my building without looking back, though I felt his eyes following me until I'd safely entered the lobby. Only when I reached my tiny apartment did I allow myself to examine the business card again, to consider what kind of proposition a man like Dante Volkov might make to a struggling luthier he'd met under the strangest circumstances. Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams filled with mahogany and maple, with the scent of varnish and the weight of violin bows balanced in my palm, with dark eyes that seemed to see past every defense I'd ever built, and the impossible promise that some things might still be worth the cost. The black car arrived at exactly 11:30, pulling up outside my building with the same whisper-quiet elegance as the night before. Roman, the driver, was a man in his 50s with silver-threaded dark hair and the kind of alert posture that suggested military training. He opened the door with a respectful nod. "Miss Clara, Mr. Volkov is expecting you." I'd spent the morning in my workshop, trying to lose myself in the familiar ritual of wood selection for a commission that might never be completed. My hands had moved automatically through the process, testing grain patterns, checking for imperfections, listening to the resonance of each piece with the trained ear that had taken years to develop. But my mind kept returning to Dante's card, to his dark eyes, to the impossible promise of salvation I couldn't quite let myself believe in. I'd changed clothes 3 times before settling on what I hoped struck the right balance. Professional enough for a business meeting, but not so formal that I looked like I was trying too hard. Dark jeans, a clean blouse, my grandmother's silver pendant. My hair pulled back in a practical bun that revealed the small scar on my temple from a chisel that had slipped during my apprenticeship. My hands were clean but showed their permanent stains. Calluses that no amount of lotion could soften. Faint lines of wood dye that had seeped too deep to wash away completely. The drive took us through progressively wealthier neighborhoods, buildings growing taller and more austere, until we pulled up before a glass and steel tower that seemed to pierce the sky itself. The Volkov building, read discreet letters near the entrance. Roman escorted me through a lobby that looked more like an art gallery than an office building, all marble and modern sculptures, to a private elevator that required a keycard to operate. We rode in silence to the top floor, my stomach dropping with each rapid ascent. The elevator opened directly into an office that spanned the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offering a 360-degree view of the city. Minimal furniture, a massive desk of dark wood, leather chairs, shelves lined with books, and what looked like carefully curated art pieces. And standing by the window, backlit by noon sun, was Dante. He'd changed from last night's deliberately casual clothes into a charcoal suit that fit him with the precision of custom tailoring. But he'd kept his jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing those scarred forearms I'd noticed. The effect was both professional and somehow intimate, as if he was showing me something real beneath the polish. "Clara." He turned from the window, and his expression softened in a way I hadn't seen the night before. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit." He gestured to 2 chairs positioned near the window rather than across his intimidating desk. A small table between them held water glasses, and what looked like fresh pastries from the bakery I passed every morning on my way to the workshop. Impossible that he could know that detail, yet there they were. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said as we both sat. After the strangeness of last night, it would have been reasonable to decide I was either insane or dangerous. "I'm still not convinced you're neither," I replied, then immediately regretted the honest. But Dante laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features. "Fair enough. Let me try to address both concerns." He leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes intent on mine. "I'm going to tell you things I don't usually share, because I need you to understand who I am and what I'm offering, and because I think you deserve honesty after your kindness last night." "All right." My family built this empire over 3 generations. We started in shipping, expanded into real estate, investments, hospitality. All legitimate businesses now. He paused on that word, now, in a way that suggested a complicated history. But we came from difficult origins. My grandfather did what he had to do to survive in a city that didn't welcome immigrants with open arms. Some of those methods were, let's say, ethically gray. I thought about the danger I'd sensed in him last night, the coiled readiness, the way he'd assessed everything with calculating eyes. "Are you telling me your family has ties to organized crime?" Had, past tense. His voice was firm. "My father spent his life legitimizing our operations. I've continued that work. Everything we do now is legal, documented, audited. But the reputation lingers. People see the name Volkov and make assumptions. Like Sophia did. Exactly like Sophia did. Though in her case, once she learned the truth about my wealth, the ethical concerns suddenly disappeared." His mouth twisted with bitter amusement. "Fascinating how flexible moral principles become when enough money is involved. Why the test? Why not just be honest from the start?" Dante stood, moving to the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the city skyline. "Because I'm tired, Clara. Tired of people who want what I can provide without caring who I am. Tired of relationships built on transactions rather than truth. My father died last year, and suddenly there's pressure from every direction to marry, to produce an heir, to continue the family line." He turned back to face me. "I've been through 6 relationships in 18 months. Each woman was beautiful, accomplished, socially connected. Each one claimed to love me, and each one, when I dug deeper, was really in love with my portfolio. So you dress as a mechanic and take them to expensive restaurants to see if they'll dump you?" Essentially, yes. Last night was the 6th test. Sophia lasted longer than most, 6 months before I set up the scenario. But her reaction confirmed what I'd already begun to suspect. That she was using you. That she didn't see me at all. Just the lifestyle I could provide. He moved back to his chair, sitting down with a heavy sigh. "Which brings me to why you're here." My heart began beating faster. Whatever he was about to propose, I sensed it would be both unexpected and irreversible. "I'm listening. I need a wife. Not for love. I'm past believing that's possible for someone in my position, but for practical reasons. My father's will requires me to be married within 2 years of his death, or the company gets sold off, divided among shareholders. 8 months have already passed. I have 16 months left." I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. "You're asking me to marry you? We met 12 hours ago. I'm offering you a business arrangement." His voice was steady, matter of fact. "A contract marriage. 1 year minimum to satisfy the will's requirements. In exchange, I'll pay off your workshop loan immediately, provide you with operating capital, connect you with musicians and collectors who appreciate master craftsmanship. You'll have the financial security to focus entirely on your art. And you get what? A wife who's essentially an employee? I get someone real. Someone who showed me kindness when she thought I had nothing. Someone who risks things for principle rather than profit." He leaned forward. "Clara, in the 30 seconds you spoke to me last night, you revealed more genuine character than 6 months of careful dating showed me about Sophia. You're exactly the kind of person I need in my life, even if it's contractual rather than romantic." This is insane. I stood, needing movement, needing air. "You can't possibly think this is a good idea." "Why not? We'd both get what we need. You'd save your workshop. I'd satisfy the legal requirements and get a spouse who isn't trying to manipulate me for money. After a year, we can either renegotiate or part ways amicably. What if I fall in love with someone else during that year? Then we include discretion clauses. As long as you're careful, I won't interfere with your personal life. The same applies to me." I moved to the window, looking out at the city sprawling below. From this height, everything looked manageable, ordered, the chaos reduced to patterns of streets and buildings. But I knew the truth, that down there in those streets, people's lives were messy and complicated and rarely followed neat contractual terms. Why me specifically? There must be dozens of women who would accept this arrangement. Because you didn't know who I was when you helped me. Because you risked something that mattered to you. Your evening's wages. For a stranger's dignity. Because you create beauty with your hands instead of just consuming it. His voice softened. And because when I watched you walk into your building last night, I thought, there goes someone who still believes some things are worth the cost. That quality is rarer than you know, Clara. I turned to face him. What would this marriage actually look like? Would we have to pretend to be in love? In public, we'd need to appear companionable, attend events together, show basic affection. In private, you'd have your own space. The penthouse has separate wings. We'd be roommates more than spouses, at least initially. And after the year? If we both want to continue, we renegotiate terms. If not, you keep everything I've provided. The workshop is yours free and clear regardless. I'm not looking to trap anyone, Clara. Just to solve a problem in a way that benefits both of us. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was madness. You didn't marry strangers, didn't sign contracts turning relationships into transactions, didn't trust men who orchestrated elaborate tests instead of simply being honest. But the desperate part, the part that had spent 6 years building something beautiful only to watch it slip away, whispered that maybe this was my only chance. I need to think about it. Of course, take a week. Here. He handed me a folder I hadn't noticed on the table. The full contract terms. Have a lawyer review it. I'll pay their fees regardless of your decision. Everything is there. Financial arrangements, living situations, terms for ending the marriage, confidentiality clauses. I took the folder with trembling hands. It was surprisingly thick, the weight of legal documentation making the surreal offer suddenly concrete. And if I say no, then I thank you again for your kindness, and we never speak of this. Your workshop situation remains entirely your own concern. I won't interfere either way. Something about that promise, about his willingness to let me refuse without consequence, made me trust him more than any amount of money could have. He wasn't trying to leverage my desperation, wasn't making veiled threats about what would happen if I declined. He was offering a choice, genuine and free. I'll read this carefully, and I'll call you with my answer. That's all I ask. He stood, extending his hand for a formal shake. When I took it, his grip was firm and warm, those calloused palms pressing against mine. Whatever you decide, Clara, I meant what I said last night. Meeting you reminded me that not everyone in this world has forgotten how to be decent. That matters more than you know. Roman drove me back to my building in the same quiet efficiency as before. I clutched the folder to my chest, feeling the weight of impossible decisions pressing against my ribs with each breath. The workshop was waiting when I returned, silent and patient in the afternoon light. I ran my hands over the violins in various states of completion, the spruce soundboard I'd been carving for weeks, the maple back that needed its final varnish coat, the neck awaiting its precise measurements for string height. 6 years of learning, of failure, of slowly developing the skills that separated adequate instruments from extraordinary ones. All of it about to disappear in 30 days, unless I accepted a proposal so bizarre it had to be either destiny or disaster. I opened the folder and began to read. The contract was exactly as Dante had described. Straightforward terms, generous financial provisions, clear exit clauses. One clause caught my attention. The agreement may be terminated early by mutual consent or extended beyond the initial year if both parties agree. At no point will Clara's professional autonomy be compromised or her creative decisions subject to approval. He'd built in protection for the very thing that mattered most to me, my work, my art, my independence in the only area where I'd ever felt truly myself. 3 days later, after consulting with a lawyer whose fees Dante had indeed paid, after lying awake each night weighing impossible options, after standing in my workshop and imaging it seized, auctioned, turned into something ordinary, I called the number on his card. Clara. He answered immediately, as if he'd been waiting. Have you decided? Yes. My voice was steadier than I felt. I have one condition beyond what's in the contract. Name it. I want to keep working in my current workshop, not relocate to some fancy studio you provide. This space matters to me. It holds 6 years of my life. If we're doing this, if we're signing a contract marriage, then I need the place where I actually feel like myself to stay mine. Silence on the other end. Then, done. I'll have the lease transferred to your name, paid in full for the next decade. Anything else? When would we need to marry? As soon as possible. The will's clock is ticking, and I'd rather have time to establish the marriage before any shareholders question its validity. How soon is as soon as possible? There's a judge who owes me a favor. We could be married by the end of the week if you're willing. The end of the week. 5 days to transform from struggling luthier to contract wife of a man whose last name carried weight and danger in equal measure. 5 days to change everything about my life, except the part that mattered most. Okay. The word came out barely above a whisper. Let's do it. You're certain? Clara, I need to know you're choosing this freely, not just because you're desperate. I'm choosing it because you're right. We both get what we need. And because you built protection for my work into the contract before I even asked. That tells me something about who you are. I could hear the smile in his voice. I'll send Roman to pick you up tomorrow at noon. We'll handle the legal paperwork, and I'll arrange the ceremony for Friday afternoon. Simple, private, just us and the required witnesses. Is that acceptable? Yes. Clara, thank you for trusting me with this. I promise I'll make it worth the risk. After we hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, running my hands over the wood shavings that covered every surface, breathing in the scent of lacquer and rosin that had become more familiar than my own apartment. In 5 days, I would become Mrs. Clara Volkoff, a wife without love, a spouse without romance, a partner bound by contract rather than emotion. But my workshop would survive. My art would continue. And maybe, just maybe, I'd find something worth the cost in a marriage that began with kindness instead of passion, with honesty instead of illusion. The wood shavings drifted slowly to the floor as I stood, their spiraling descent beautiful and temporary, like everything else in this world, except the music we create and the choices we make when there are no good options, only less impossible ones. The judge's chambers smelled of leather-bound law books and old coffee. I stood beside Dante in a simple cream dress I'd bought that morning, my hands clutching a bouquet of white roses that Roman had presented when he picked me up. 3 days had passed since I'd accepted Dante's proposal, 3 days of paperwork and legal documents, and the surreal awareness that I was about to marry a man I'd spoken to exactly 4 times. Do you, Dante Mikhail Volkov, take Clara Sophia Reed to be your lawfully wedded wife? Dante's voice was steady, his dark eyes never leaving mine. I do. And do you, Clara Sophia Reed, take Dante Mikhail Volkov to be your lawfully wedded husband? My mouth went dry. This was the moment, the last chance to back out, to return to my struggling workshop and uncertain future, to choose familiar desperation over unknown compromise. I thought about the bank letter in my pocket, now obsolete. Thought about the transfer confirmation showing my workshop loan paid in full. The lease renewed for 10 years. The operating account with more money than I'd earn in 5 years of perfect commissions. I thought about Dante's hand on mine during the contract signing, the way he'd looked at me when I'd insisted on keeping my workshop unchanged, the respect in his voice when he'd said, "Your art matters, Clara. This marriage won't change that." I do. The judge smiled, clearly unaware this was a business arrangement rather than a love match. By the power vested in me by the state of New York, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Dante's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite read. Nervousness, perhaps, or uncertainty. We hadn't discussed this part. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away, but I held still as his lips brushed mine in the briefest, most chaste kiss imaginable. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds, more symbolic than passionate, but I felt the warmth of it spread through my chest nonetheless. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Volkov. Roman and Adrian, Dante's business partner who'd served as witness, applauded politely. Adrian was tall and elegant, with sharp cheekbones and calculating eyes that had assessed me thoroughly before the ceremony. He'd pulled me aside earlier with blunt words. He's my best friend, so I'm going to say this once. If you're playing him, if this is some elaborate con, I will destroy you in ways you can't imagine. Understood? I'd met his gaze evenly. I'm here because he offered a solution we both needed. Nothing more, nothing less. But I appreciate you looking out for him. Something had shifted in Adrian's expression then. Not quite approval, but a grudging acknowledgement that perhaps I wasn't another Sophia. Now we stood in the judge's chambers, officially married, and I felt nothing like what brides were supposed to feel. No overwhelming joy, no certainty of forever. Just a strange calm and the practical awareness that my life had just changed in ways I couldn't yet fully comprehend. Shall we? Dante offered his arm. Roman has the car waiting. The penthouse was everything I'd expected, and nothing I could have imagined. The entire top floor of a building in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views, modern furniture that looked more like art pieces than functional objects, and a sterility that spoke of professional design rather than personal taste. Your wing is on the east side, Dante said, leading me through the cavernous space. Bedroom, private bath, sitting room, and I've had a smaller workshop area set up if you want to do detail work here sometimes. The main workshop remains yours, of course, but I thought having tools available here might be convenient. He opened a door, revealing a suite that was larger than my entire previous apartment. The bedroom was decorated in soft grays and creams, tasteful and impersonal, but through another door, I could see what he'd meant by a smaller workshop area, a room with excellent natural light, a sturdy work table, and a selection of tools that made my breath catch. Not cheap substitutes, but professional-grade implements, some of which I'd coveted for years, but could never afford. How did you know what I needed? I asked, running my fingers over a set of precision carving gouges. I visited your workshop yesterday while you were meeting with the lawyer about the contract. Not to snoop, he added quickly at my expression, but to understand what tools matter to you. Adrian's wife is a sculptor. She helped me select these. If anything is wrong or missing, we can adjust it. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught me off guard. This wasn't just throwing money at a problem. This was paying attention, caring about details that mattered to me specifically. Thank you. This is more than I expected. You're my wife now, Clara. Even if it's contractual, I take that seriously. He gestured toward the rest of the suite. You have complete privacy here. I won't enter without permission. My wing is on the opposite side. We can go days without seeing each other if you prefer. But I hope we won't. What do you mean? Dante moved to the window, his shoulders tense beneath his expensive suit. I know this isn't a real marriage in the traditional sense, but I'd like us to be friends, if possible. To actually talk, get to know each other. The arrangement works better if we're not complete strangers. Ooh, you want to be friends with your contract wife? I want to be friends with Clara Reed, the luthier who risked her wages for a stranger's dignity. The wife part is just the legal framework that makes it possible. He turned back to face me. Unless you'd prefer to keep this entirely businesslike, I'll respect whatever boundaries you set. I considered that, weighing the loneliness of parallel lives against the risk of actually getting to know this complicated man I'd married. Friends seems reasonable, but Dante, I need you to understand something. What? I can't be what Sophia was supposed to be. I don't know how to move in your social circles, how to make small talk with the kind of people who probably own my annual income and jewelry. If you're expecting me to transform into some polished society wife, I'm expecting you to be exactly who you are. His voice was firm. That's the entire point, Clara. I'm tired of performance. If you want to show up to charity galas in jeans with wood shavings in your hair, that's fine. If you'd rather skip them entirely and spend your evenings in your workshop, that's fine too. The only requirement is that we occasionally appear together publicly to maintain the appearance of an actual marriage. Everything else is negotiable. What about your family? Won't they question a wife who doesn't fit their expectations? Something dark flickered across his face. I have very little family left. My father is dead. My mother lives in Moscow. We speak perhaps twice a year. I have a younger sister, Katerina, who lives in Paris, and whose approval I stopped seeking years ago. Adrian is closer to family than anyone related by blood. The loneliness in his voice resonated with my own experience. I don't have much family either. My parents died when I was 20. My grandmother, who taught me Luthery, passed 3 years ago. There's no one who'll question why I married someone I barely know, because there's no one paying attention. Then we're both starting fresh, building whatever this is without outside interference. Dante checked his watch. I need to handle some business calls, but I've arranged for dinner to be delivered at 7. Will you join me? Nothing formal, just a chance to talk without judges and contracts. All right. After he left, I explored my new quarters with the strange awareness that this was now my home, at least temporarily. The closet held clothes I hadn't selected. Someone had taken my measurements and filled the space with quality pieces in my preferred style. The bathroom was marble and glass, with a soaking tub I would never have time to use and toiletries from brands I'd never heard of. Everything was perfect, impersonal, like a luxury hotel rather than a home. I returned to the small workshop area and ran my hands over the tools again, testing their balance, their heft. These, at least, felt real. Felt like something I understood in a world that had become suddenly foreign. At 7 precisely, I found Dante in what he called the informal dining area, a space that would have comfortably seated 12, but held only a table set for 2. Chinese food containers covered the surface, steam rising from noodles and dumplings and vegetables that smelled infinitely better than the fancy restaurant fare I'd been serving at Il Sogno. I didn't know what you liked, Dante said, gesturing to the spread. So I ordered one of everything from the best place in Chinatown. Help yourself. We filled plates and ate in initially awkward silence, the clink of chopsticks against porcelain too loud in the cavernous space. But gradually, conversation began to flow. Dante asked about my training, about how I'd learned Luthery, and I found myself telling stories about my grandmother's workshop in Vermont, about the first violin I'd ruined through impatience, about the transcendent moment when I'd completed an instrument that actually sang. Music is different when you've built the thing that makes it, I tried to explain. You hear not just the notes, but the wood itself, the way the grain responds to different frequencies, the resonance chambers you spent weeks perfecting. It's like raising a child, except you can actually control how they turn out. Dante laughed at that. I imagine children are more complicated. Do you want them? Children? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Too personal for people who'd been married for less than 6 hours. But Dante didn't seem bothered. Someday, maybe. If I ever find someone I trust enough to be their mother, the pressure from my father was always about heirs, about continuing the family name. But I watched my parents' marriage, all duty and obligation, no warmth. I don't want that for any child of mine. So you married a stranger instead. I couldn't help the slight edge in my voice. I married someone honest instead. He met my gaze steadily. Clara, I know this isn't conventional, but I'd rather build something real with you, even if it started as a contract, than spend my life with someone who only loved my money. At least with you, I know where I stand. And where is that? On uncertain ground, building a foundation that might actually hold, or might collapse spectacularly. His mouth curved in a slight smile. But either way, it's honest. That's worth something. The weeks that followed settled into an unexpected rhythm. Dante would leave early for his office downtown, returning around 7. I'd spend my days in my workshop, losing myself in the familiar rituals of wood selection and carving, occasionally touching the wedding ring on my finger, with surprise at its presence. Most evenings we'd share dinner, sometimes delivered food, sometimes cooked by the private chef Dante employed but seemed almost embarrassed about. "I can cook," he'd insisted the first time the chef appeared. Basic things, pasta, eggs, sandwiches, but after 16-hour days it's easier to have help. We talked during those dinners, gradually learning each other's histories and preferences. I discovered Dante had studied classical piano as a child until his father declared it impractical. That he read voraciously, everything from philosophy to crime fiction. That he had a dry wit that only emerged when he felt comfortable, and a surprising vulnerability about whether he was making the right choices with his late father's company. He spent 30 years legitimizing what my grandfather built through violence and intimidation, Dante told me one evening. Every day I'm terrified I'll make some decision that undoes all that work, that sends us sliding back into the darkness he fought to escape. Do you think that's possible? Sliding back? The temptation is always there. When someone steals from you, when a business rival uses underhanded tactics, when you have the power and connections to solve problems the way my grandfather did, quickly, permanently, without the delays of laws and courts. His hands clenched around his wine glass. I understand why he made those choices. I understand the appeal of absolute control. That's what terrifies me. But you don't choose that way. Not yet. But I see how thin the line is between legitimate business and other methods. Especially when you have people who remember the old ways, who worked for my father and grandfather and expect certain solutions to problems. I thought about that later, lying alone in my too-large bed in my impersonal suite. I'd married a man fighting against his own history, against the pull of inherited darkness. It should have frightened me more than it did. Instead, I found myself respecting the conscious choice he made every day to be different than what he'd been raised to become. 6 weeks into our marriage, Dante invited me to my first public appearance as his wife, a charity gala benefiting youth music programs. "It's cause you might actually care about," he said carefully. "And Adrian will be there with his wife, Isabel. She's been asking to meet you." "Why?" "Because she's curious about the woman who agreed to marry me under such strange circumstances, and because she thinks you're either brilliant or crazy, possibly both." I laughed despite my nervousness. "What do you think?" "I think you're brave, and kinder than you realize, and that you've made the last 6 weeks more bearable than I expected." His voice softened. "Thank you for that, Clara." The gala required formal wear, which meant raiding the closet of designer dresses that had appeared in my suite. I chose something simple in deep blue, pinned my hair up, and stared at the stranger in the mirror who looked polished in ways I'd never aspired to. Dante knocked precisely at 8. When I opened the door, his eyes widened slightly. "You look beautiful." "I look uncomfortable." I tugged at the dress's neckline. "I'd rather be in my workshop jeans." "Then wear those." "I'm serious, Clara. If this isn't you, don't force it." "No, it's fine. I can manage one night of playing dress-up if it helps maintain the appearance we need." I grabbed the small clutch that matched the dress. "But you owe me." "Name your price. Take me to your favorite dumpling place tomorrow. The one you mentioned from Chinatown. No drivers, no formal clothes, just us eating like normal people." His smile was genuine, transforming his usually serious features. Deal. The gala was exactly as overwhelming as I'd feared. A ballroom full of people wearing wealth like armor, conversations flowing in practiced social rhythms I'd never learned. But Dante remained at my side, his hand at the small of my back, steadying and possessive in equal measure. He introduced me simply. "My wife, Clara. She's a luthier, builds violins by hand." The reactions varied. Some people lit up with genuine interest, asking detailed questions about my work. Others' eyes glazed over, clearly finding craftsmanship less interesting than the diamonds dripping from every wrist and neck. A few gave me assessing looks that suggested they were trying to figure out how someone like me had captured Dante Volkov. "Ignore them," Isabel whispered when we found ourselves alone at the bar. Adrian's wife was petite and fierce, with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. Half these people have never created anything in their lives beyond social drama. The fact that you build actual beauty with your hands, that terrifies them. Why? Because it means you have value beyond what you can purchase or inherit. That's dangerous to people whose entire identity is wrapped up in their bank accounts. She sipped her champagne. "I like you, Clara, and I'm glad Dante found someone real for once. You know about the arrangement? Adrian told me everything. Swore me to secrecy, of course." Her gaze was direct. "I think you're both crazy, but I also think you might actually make this work if you're honest with each other." "We're honest." "Are you? Have you told him yet that you're already half in love with him?" I nearly dropped my water glass. We're not. It's just a contract." "Tell yourself that if it helps you sleep." Isabel's smile was knowing. "But I've seen the way you look at him when you think no one's watching, and the way he looks at you. That man is absolutely gone, even if he hasn't admitted it yet." Before I could respond, Dante appeared at my elbow. "Everything all right?" "Perfect," Isabel said smoothly. "I was just telling Clara she needs to join us for dinner next week. All four of us, somewhere without this crowd." "I'd like that," I said, meaning it. Having an ally, a friend who understood the strangeness of my situation, suddenly seemed invaluable. The evening wound down around midnight. As we rode home in the back of Roman's car, Dante loosened his tie with a sigh of relief. "Thank you for coming tonight. I know it wasn't easy." It was fine. Isabel was right. Some people there were genuinely interested in Luthery. I might have made some contacts. I hesitated, then added, "She said something else too. That we were crazy for trying this arrangement." "What do you think? Are we crazy?" I looked at him in the dim light of the car, at his tired eyes and the slight smile playing at his lips, and thought about Isabel's observation. About the way dinner with him had become the best part of my day. About how I'd started unconsciously timing my workshop breaks to coincide with his calls. About the fact that my supposedly temporary quarters felt more like home than my old apartment ever had. "Maybe," I admitted. "But it's working, isn't it? The arrangement." "It's working." His hand found mine on the seat between us, squeezing gently. "More than working. Clara, I want you to know. This last month and a half getting to know you, sharing meals and conversation, it's been good. Really good. For me too." We held hands the rest of the drive home, neither of us acknowledging the shift that had occurred, the way a contract was slowly becoming something more real than either of us had anticipated. When we reached the penthouse, Dante walked me to my suite's door, a courtesy he'd maintained since our wedding night. "Tomorrow," he said. "Dumplings in Chinatown. I'll pick you up at your workshop around noon. I'll be covered in wood shavings." "Good. That's you being real." He leaned in, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he pressed his lips to my forehead, gentle and warm. "Sleep well, Clara." I watched him walk away toward his wing, my fingers touching the spot his lips had warmed, my heart beating faster than it should for a marriage that was supposed to be purely contractual. Isabel was wrong, I told myself. I wasn't falling in love. This was just friendship, comfort, the normal development of trust between two people living together. But as I lay in bed that night, my fingers unconsciously turning the wedding ring around and around, I wondered if perhaps I was the one lying to myself. If perhaps the most dangerous thing about a contract marriage wasn't that it might fail, but that it might succeed in ways neither of us had planned for. The wood shavings would wait until morning. Tonight, I let myself imagine what it might be like if this arrangement became something real, if the man sleeping in his separate wing actually became the husband whose ring I wore. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with something dangerously close to hope. 3 months into our contract marriage, I stood in my workshop at midnight, testing the resonance of a violin I'd spent 6 weeks perfecting. The spruce soundboard vibrated with exactly the clarity I'd been chasing, each frequency pure and distinct. I'd finally achieved what my grandmother called singing wood, that moment when an instrument transcends mere craftsmanship and becomes capable of genuine music. The door opened behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know it was Dante. Over the past months, I'd learned the sound of his footsteps, the particular way he moved through space with that coiled readiness that never quite disappeared. "It's late," he said quietly. "Roman mentioned you were still here when he did his security check." "Almost done." I set the violin carefully on its stand. I needed to finish the varnish work while the humidity was right. Dante moved closer, studying the instrument with genuine interest. He'd been visiting my workshop more frequently lately, usually bringing coffee or food, sometimes just sitting in the corner and working on his laptop while I carved. His presence had become as natural as the scent of wood shavings, as comfortable as my favorite tools. "It's beautiful," he said, and the reverence in his voice told me he actually saw it. Not just an expensive object, but something created with love and patience and skill. "Play something for me?" I asked impulsively. "You mentioned you studied piano. I'd like to hear you." Something vulnerable flickered across his face. "I haven't played in years, not since my father died." "Why?" "He never approved. Said music was for people with the luxury of impracticality." Dante's jaw tightened. After he passed, I thought about starting again. But it felt like betrayal somehow, doing something he'd forbidden when he wasn't there to argue about it. I understood that complicated grief, the way love and resentment tangled together until you couldn't separate them. Would he be angry that you married me? A luthier who builds instruments instead of empires? Probably, Dante smiled slightly. But he'd also respect that I found a solution to the will's requirements. My father valued problem-solving above sentiment. "And what do you value?" The question hung between us in the quiet workshop. Outside, the city hummed with late-night traffic, but in here, surrounded by wood and tools and the ghosts of unfinished music, we existed in our own bubble of possibility. "Honesty," Dante said finally. "Loyalty. The courage to be yourself even when it costs you." His dark eyes found mine. "You have all of those qualities, Clara. That's why this arrangement works." Arrangement. The word stung more than it should have, because increasingly, what existed between us felt less like a business transaction and more like, I didn't have words for it. More than friendship, not quite love, something genuine growing in the spaces between contract clauses. "Come on," I said, needing to shift away from dangerous territory. "Let's go home. I'm starving, and I think there's leftover Thai food from yesterday." "Home." He repeated the word as if testing its weight. "You call it that now. Isn't it?" I hoped it was becoming that for you, but I wasn't sure. We locked up the workshop and drove back to the penthouse in comfortable silence. The city lights blurred past the windows, and I found myself thinking about how much had changed since that night at Il Sogno. I'd saved my workshop, but gained something more complex. A life entangled with a man I'd married for practical reasons and stayed with because he'd become essential in ways I hadn't anticipated. Over the next 2 months, our lives wove tighter together. Dante started accompanying me to symphony performances where I'd network with musicians who might commission instruments. I joined him for business dinners where my presence legitimized our marriage to skeptical shareholders. We fell into patterns, coffee together before he left for the office, dinner shared in the informal dining area, late-night conversations that stretched past midnight, and sometimes, increasingly often, those conversations ended with Dante walking me to my suite's door and pausing there, his hand on my cheek, his eyes asking questions neither of us was quite ready to answer. 5 months after our wedding, everything changed. I was working late in my main workshop, putting finishing touches on a commission for a concert violinist, when I heard the door open. Assuming it was Dante with his usual evening visit, I called out without looking up. "I'll be done in 10 minutes, then we can head home." The response was footsteps, multiple sets, moving wrong, too quick, too purposeful. I looked up to find 3 men I didn't recognize spreading out through my workshop, their postures threatening, their eyes assessing everything with calculated interest. "Pretty little setup you've got here," the leader said. He was tall and broad, with a shaved head and a scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "Heard the Volkov bitch spends her evenings playing with wood." Fear spiked through me, sharp and cold. I reached slowly for my phone, but one of the other men was faster, snatching it off the workbench. "No calls. Boss wants to have a conversation with Volkov, and you're the message." "I don't know what you're talking about." I tried to keep my voice steady. "You have the wrong person. Clara Volkov, wife of Dante Volkov. Oh, we got the right person." He moved closer, and I saw the gun tucked into his waistband. "See? Your husband's been making moves in territories that don't belong to him. The Morozov family doesn't appreciate the competition." Morozov. I'd heard Dante mention that name once in a phone call he'd taken during dinner, his expression darkening at whatever was said. I'd asked later, but he'd deflected, saying only that it was business complications from the old days. "Whatever issues you have with Dante, I'm not part of his business." I edged slowly toward where I kept my sharpest carving tools, hoping they wouldn't notice the movement. "I just build violins, and you just married the head of the Volkov organization. That makes you part of it whether you like it or not." The leader pulled out his phone, taking a photo of me. "Smile for your husband, Mrs. Volkov. Let him see what happens when he forgets which families run this city." The flash startled me, and in that instant, I grabbed the carving gouge I'd been reaching for and swung it wildly. Not trying to injure, just to create space, to give myself a chance to run. The blade caught the leader's arm, a shallow cut that still drew blood and a roar of anger. "You little..." The workshop door exploded inward. Dante appeared like something out of a nightmare, flanked by Roman and 2 other men I'd never seen. But it wasn't the backup that made the Morozov men freeze. It was Dante himself. The carefully controlled businessman I'd been living with had vanished, replaced by something cold and terrifying. Someone who moved with deadly purpose and showed no trace of hesitation. "Get your hands off my wife." The words were quiet, almost conversational, which made them infinitely more dangerous than shouting would have been. The leader of the Morozov men reassessed the situation quickly, clearly calculating odds that had shifted dramatically. "Just delivering a message from our boss, Volkov. You're expanding into territories that aren't yours. Stop, or next time we won't be so polite. Next time?" Dante moved forward slowly, and I saw the Morozov men actually step back, despite outnumbering him. "You broke into my wife's workshop. You threatened her. There won't be a next time for you." The leader's hand moved toward his gun. Everything happened impossibly fast. Roman was suddenly there, grabbing the man's wrist with force that made bones crack audibly. The other Morozov men found themselves similarly restrained by Dante's backup. And Dante himself stood in front of me, blocking me from view, his body a shield. "Clara," he said without turning around. "Are you hurt?" "No." My voice came out shakier than I intended. "I'm fine. Go wait in the car. Roman will take you home. I'll handle this." "Dante..." "Now, Clara. Please." The tone allowed no argument. Roman escorted me out while the Morozov men were being handled. I didn't look back. didn't want to see whatever Dante was about to do to people who'd threatened me. But I heard his voice as we left, cold and absolute. Tell Morozov that if he sends anyone near my wife again, I'll remind him exactly why my grandfather's reputation still carries weight in this city. The drive home passed in a blur. Roman deposited me safely in the penthouse and then left, presumably to return to Dante. I paced the living room, my hands still trembling, my mind trying to process what had just happened. I'd known, abstractly, about Dante's family history, about the gray areas his grandfather had operated in, the legitimate business his father had built from darker origins. But knowing intellectually was different from seeing him transform into someone capable of genuine violence, from hearing the steel in his voice when he'd threatened to use his family's bloody legacy. An hour later, Dante came home. He looked tired, older somehow, the weight of his history visible in the set of his shoulders. When he saw me waiting, relief flooded his features. "Clara, God, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry you were dragged into this. What did you do to them?" I needed to know, needed to understand exactly who I'd married. Sent a message. Nothing permanent, nothing that crosses legal lines, but enough to make Morozov understand that touching you is off limits. He moved closer, then stopped, as if unsure whether I'd welcome his proximity. I thought I'd left that world behind. Thought legitimizing the business meant I wouldn't have to deal with families like the Morozovs anymore. But apparently, they see our expansion in shipping and real estate as threatening their interests. "Are you in danger? Am I? I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise, Clara. Whatever I have to do, whatever old connections I need to use, you'll be safe." That's not what I asked. I met his gaze steadily. I asked if we're in danger. Are we? Dante's expression crumbled slightly. Potentially. The Morozovs aren't known for backing down easily. But I have resources. Protection. And now they know touching you means war. War. The word sat heavy between us. This is what you meant about the temptation to slide back into old methods. This is the darkness you fight against. Yes. He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. I try so hard to be different than my father, than my grandfather, to prove the business is legitimate now. But men like Morozov see any sign of weakness as invitation. If I don't respond with enough force, they'll keep testing boundaries until someone gets seriously hurt. I sat beside him, my fear gradually being replaced by understanding. You're caught between two worlds, too legitimate for the old families, too connected to history for the new ones to fully trust. Exactly. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw exhaustion and regret, and something deeper. Clara, if you want to end this arrangement now, I'll understand. This isn't what you signed up for. The contract included security concerns, but I never imagined it would get this dangerous. Do you want me to leave? No. The word came out almost desperately. God, no. Having you here, sharing dinners and conversations, watching you work in your element, it's become the best part of my life. But I won't trap you in a situation that could get you killed. I thought about the past 5 months, about how Dante had never pushed me, never demanded more than I willingly gave, never used our contract as leverage for anything beyond its stated terms, about the man who brought me coffee at midnight, who learned the names of every tool in my workshop, who looked at my finished violins with genuine wonder, about the husband I'd married for practical reasons and stayed with because somehow, impossibly, he'd become essential. I'm not leaving, I said finally. But I need you to be completely honest with me. About your business, about the dangers, about who you really are. No more deflecting or protecting me from uncomfortable truths. Everything? Everything. If I'm going to be actually married to you, not just contractually, then I need to know what I'm dealing with. His eyes widened slightly at my phrasing. actually married. Isn't that what's happening? We stopped being strangers performing an arrangement weeks ago, Dante. We're friends at minimum. And I think... I hesitated, then pushed forward. I think we're becoming more than that. He reached for my hand slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't. His scarred palm pressed against mine, warm and solid. I think we are too, and it terrifies me. Why? Because I didn't plan for this. Didn't expect to actually care about my contract wife. But somewhere between dumplings in Chinatown and you falling asleep on my shoulder during a symphony performance, you became real to me. Important. And now you're in danger because of who I am. Then protect me. Not by pushing me away, but by being honest and letting me make informed choices. I squeezed his hand. Tell me everything, Dante, starting with the Morozovs and ending with whatever else you've been trying to shield me from. So he did. Over the next several hours, Dante told me everything. About his grandfather's role in organized crime, about his father's decades-long effort to legitimize their operations, about the gray areas that still existed, about families like the Morozovs who resented the Volkovs for going soft, about legitimate business rivals who spread rumors about his family's history to undermine his current ventures, about the constant balancing act between honor and pragmatism, between the person he wanted to be and the person his position sometimes required. I'm not my grandfather, he said finally, exhaustion evident in his voice. I don't hurt people for profit or power. Everything I do now is legal, documented. But I have connections, knowledge, ways of solving problems that aren't exactly conventional. And when someone threatens you, Clara, I'll use every resource available, old ways included, to keep you safe. I absorbed all of it. The history, the danger, the complicated reality of loving a man whose past cast long shadows. Because I did love him, I realized. Somewhere in the past 5 months, the contract had become irrelevant, and the husband I'd married for practical reasons had become the man I couldn't imagine living without. Okay, I said simply. Okay. I understand the situation. I'm choosing to stay anyway. But Dante, if we're doing this, if we're transforming this contract into something real, then we need to be honest about all of it, including the fact that I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. Dante stared at me, his expression cycling through shock, hope, and something that looked like fear. Clara, you can't... I'm not... There are so many reasons this is a bad idea. Name one that actually matters. You deserve better than someone with my history, my complications. I deserve someone who treats me with respect, who supports my work, who makes me laugh over Thai food at midnight. Someone who'd face down armed men to protect me. You're all of those things, Dante. Your family's history doesn't change that. He pulled me against him suddenly, his arms wrapping around me with desperate strength. I felt him trembling slightly, felt the tension in his shoulders as years of control finally cracked. I love you too, he whispered against my hair. God help me. I fell in love with my contract wife. I tried not to, tried to keep boundaries, but you're so real, Clara. So genuine. How could I not love you? I tilted my face up, meeting his dark eyes. Then stop fighting it. Stop trying to protect me from yourself. Just be with me. Really with me. He kissed me then. Not the chaste brush of lips from our wedding, but something real and hungry, and full of months of restrained wanting. I melted into him, into the promise of something beyond contracts and arrangements, something built on truth and trust, and the surprising discovery that sometimes practical decisions lead to impractical emotions. When we finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against mine. The contract specified separate quarters for the first year. Contracts can be renegotiated. I smiled against his lips. Consider this an amendment. An amendment to what effect? To the effect that we stop pretending this is temporary. Stop pretending we're not falling in love. Stop sleeping in separate wings like strangers when we both want to be together. You're certain, because Clara, once we cross this line, I won't be able to go back. You'll be mine in truth, not just on paper. Then it's good that I want to be yours. I kissed him again. Take me to bed, Dante. Your bed. Our bed. And let's stop pretending this arrangement is anything other than what it's become. A real marriage that just happened to start with a contract. He stood, lifting me with him, and carried me toward his wing of the penthouse. For the record, he murmured, this is the best business decision I've ever made. Marrying me? Falling in love with you. That night, in Dante's bed, our bed, we renegotiated every term of our contract marriage without speaking a word. And when I fell asleep in his arms, his heartbeat steady against my cheek, I knew we'd transformed something practical into something precious. Something worth fighting for. Something worth the cost. 6 more months passed, and the contract marriage that had begun in a judge's chambers transformed into something neither of us had anticipated. Genuine partnership. Dante and I moved through life in tandem now, his business ventures occasionally intersecting with my growing reputation as a luthier. The Morozov threat had faded after Dante's response, though security remained tight around my workshop and our home. I'd grown comfortable in Dante's world while maintaining my own identity. My workshop thrived with his financial backing, but remained mine in every meaningful way. My designs, my commissions, my standards. The violins I created found their way into the hands of musicians who appreciated master craftsmanship, and word spread through classical music circles about the luthier who'd married into the Volkov family, but built instruments as if money were irrelevant. It was a Thursday evening, nearly 11 months into our marriage, when everything shifted again. I was in my workshop finishing detail work on a viola commission when my trained ear caught something wrong. Footsteps in the hallway that didn't match Roman's measured tread or Dante's purposeful stride. Too light, too hesitant, the gait of someone unfamiliar with the space trying to navigate quietly. I'd learned caution since the Morozov incident. My hand moved slowly toward my phone, but I kept working, tools moving naturally across the wood's surface, while my attention focused on tracking the approaching sound. The door opened. Lucian Constantine, Dante's business partner and childhood friend, stood in the doorway. His presence wasn't unusual. He'd visited my workshop several times, always with Dante, always to discuss business that intersected with our life. But tonight he was alone, and something about his expression made alarm bells ring in my mind. Clara. Working late again? Commission deadline. I set down my carving tool carefully. Did Dante send you? He said he'd be in meetings until midnight. Actually, I need to speak with you privately. About Dante. The phrasing was wrong. Too formal, too careful. In 11 months of knowing Lucian, he'd never sought me out alone, never requested private conversations that excluded Dante. But I kept my expression neutral, my hands steady. Of course. What's wrong? Lucian moved further into the workshop, his eyes scanning the space with assessment I'd seen before in men evaluating security risks or escape routes. How much do you know about Dante's current negotiations with the Morozov family? I know they're ongoing, that Dante's trying to reach an understanding about territorial boundaries in shipping and real estate. I'd been privy to those discussions, had even attended several meetings where my presence helped project legitimacy and stability. Has he mentioned anything about a merger? About bringing the Morozov operations under Volkov control? I shook my head, confusion joining my unease. No. He said the goal was peaceful coexistence, not absorption. That's what he tells you. Lucian's voice carried something I'd never heard from him before. contempt, maybe, or disappointment. But the reality is that Dante's been planning to take over Morozov Holdings for months, using legitimate business pressure combined with other methods. Other methods meaning what, exactly? The kind his grandfather used: intimidation, destruction of assets, threats against family members. Lucian met my gaze. Your husband isn't the reformed businessman he pretends to be, Clara. He's exactly what his bloodline suggests: a criminal using legal operations as cover. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong with this conversation, with Lucian's sudden appearance and carefully crafted accusations, but I kept my face carefully neutral, my voice steady. That doesn't sound like Dante. Because he's hidden it from you, kept you separate from the darker side of his operations. Do you think it's coincidence that the Morozovs backed off so quickly after threatening you? Dante didn't just warn them. He destroyed their waterfront operations. Burned 3 warehouses, sent 2 of their captains to the hospital. All while telling you it had been handled quietly. I thought about that night, about Dante's exhaustion when he'd returned, about his careful explanations of sending messages. Had he been lying? Or was Lucien lying now? Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know who you married, and because I need your help stopping him before he slides completely into the darkness he claims to reject. Lucian pulled out his phone, showing me what looked like financial documents. These show money moving through shell corporations to pay for illegal activities. Dante's signature on every transfer. I studied the documents, my mind working through what I was seeing. The papers looked authentic, the signatures matched, the amounts were significant. But something felt wrong. A dissonance I couldn't quite identify, like a violin with perfect construction but lifeless tone. What do you want from me? Access to his home office. There are documents I need. Proof of his dealings that will stop the merger and force him back toward legitimate operations. You can get into that office without triggering security. Lucian's voice was urgent now, persuasive. Help me save him from himself, Clara, before he becomes his grandfather's ghost. It was the mention of Dante's grandfather that clicked everything into place, because Dante had told me about his terror of becoming that man, about the constant fight against inherited darkness. These were intimate fears, shared in vulnerable moments, and Lucien was weaponizing them, using my protective instincts against the man I loved. I need to think about this, I said carefully. Those are serious accusations. We don't have time. The merger moves forward tomorrow night. If you want to help Dante, I need those documents tonight. Then I need to talk to him first. Ask him directly about the accusations. Lucian's expression hardened. He'll deny everything. Convince you I'm lying or mistaken. That's what he does, Clara. He manipulates. How do you think he got you to marry him in the first place? A contract marriage to a stranger? He needed a wife for his father's will, and he found someone desperate enough to accept. The words were designed to hurt, to make me doubt, but they had the opposite effect. Because I remembered that night at Il Sogno, remembered Dante's humiliation at Sophia's hands, remembered his genuine surprise when I'd offered him kindness. Whatever game Lucian was playing, it wasn't about saving Dante from himself. Get out of my workshop. Clara, you're not thinking clearly. The man you love is a criminal. I said get out. I stood, picking up the carving gouge I'd been using. Not a serious weapon, but enough to emphasize my seriousness. Whatever you're trying to accomplish, I won't be part of it. Lucian's expression shifted from persuasive to cold. You're making a mistake. When Dante's true nature is revealed, when everything he's built collapses, remember that you chose this. He left, and I immediately locked the door behind him, then called Dante. The phone rang 4 times before he answered, background noise suggesting he was still in meetings. Clara, is everything okay? Lucian was just here, alone, asking me to help him get documents from your home office. claiming you're planning to take over Morozov operations through illegal means. Silence on the other end, then a sharp intake of breath. Fuck. I need to call you back in 10 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to anyone. Lock yourself in the workshop, and Roman is en route to pick you up. Dante, what's happening? Lucian's the traitor. We've suspected it for weeks, but we couldn't prove it until now. He's been feeding information to our competitors, trying to destabilize the business. This approach to you was his mistake, the proof we needed. His voice was tight with controlled fury. 10 minutes, Clara. Stay safe until Roman gets there. The call ended, leaving me alone with racing thoughts and the chilling awareness that someone I'd trusted, someone Dante had considered family, had just tried to manipulate me into betraying my husband. Roman arrived within 8 minutes, his usually impassive face showing concern as he escorted me to the car. Mrs. Volkov, did Konstantin threaten you? Not directly, but he tried to convince me Dante was becoming his grandfather. The boss will want to hear everything. Every word Konstantin said. Every document he showed you. At the penthouse, Dante was waiting, flanked by Adrian and 2 security personnel I didn't recognize. His eyes found mine immediately, and the relief that flooded his features was so intense it made my chest ache. Clara. He crossed to me, pulling me into his arms with desperate strength. Thank God you're safe. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I didn't see this coming sooner. Tell me what's happening. All of it. Over the next hour, Dante, Adrian, and their security team explained. Lucian had been embezzling funds for months, using his position to skim money and sell information to Volkov competitors. When Dante had started investigating financial irregularities, Lucian had panicked, realizing he needed to either discredit Dante or gain access to evidence that could incriminate him. The Morozov situation gave him an opening, Adrian explained. He's been feeding them information about our operations, encouraging conflict, then positioning himself as the moderate voice trying to prevent escalation, all while stealing from us and setting Dante up to take the fall. And tonight, Dante continued, he tried to use you to get into my office, probably to destroy evidence we've been gathering. What he didn't know is that we'd already moved everything relevant to a secure location. But his approach to you, that's concrete evidence of attempted manipulation and conspiracy. I thought about Lucian's words, his carefully constructed narrative about Dante sliding into darkness. He knew exactly what buttons to push, knew about your fears of becoming your grandfather, because I'd confided in him, trusted him with my doubts and concerns. Dante's voice was bitter. He was my friend for 20 years, Clara. I brought him into the business, made him partner, trusted him with our family's legacy. And he's been systematically betraying us for at least 6 months, possibly longer. What happens now? We have enough evidence to prosecute. Embezzlement, corporate espionage, fraud. He'll spend significant time in prison. Dante's expression was hard. But I need to know exactly what he said to you, what documents he showed. It might reveal other players we haven't identified. I recounted the conversation in detail, describing the financial documents Lucian had displayed. Adrian pulled up copies on his tablet, authentic-looking papers that had actually been carefully constructed forgeries designed to make Dante appear corrupt. He spent significant time on these, Adrian noted. Which means he's been planning this approach for weeks. The question is whether he'll try something else now that this failed. He won't get the chance. Dante's voice carried absolute certainty. Roman, coordinate with our legal team. I want charges filed tomorrow morning. And find out who else Lucian's been talking to. If he's compromised any of our other partners, I need to know. As the security team dispersed to handle various tasks, Dante and I found ourselves alone in the penthouse's living room. City lights glittered beyond the windows, and I thought about how 11 months ago I'd first entered this space. A stranger agreeing to a contract marriage with a man I barely knew. I was right, I said quietly. About what? That night, when we married. You asked if I trusted you, and I said I'd need you to be completely honest. No more protecting me from uncomfortable truths. I met his gaze. But you've been investigating Lucian for weeks without telling me. Guilt flickered across Dante's features. I didn't want to worry you. Didn't want to poison your relationships with our friends until I had proof. Dante, we're past that. Past you protecting me from your world. If we're actually married, and we are, contract or not, then you need to trust me with the difficult things, even when you think you're shielding me. You're right. He moved to sit beside me, taking my hand. I'm sorry. Old habits. Trying to compartmentalize danger away from the people I care about. But you deserve to know what's happening, especially when it might affect you. Did you suspect he might approach me? Not specifically, but I'd warned Roman to watch for unusual activity around your workshop. Lucian knew your schedule. Knew you often worked late alone. If he was going to make a move, that would be when. Dante's jaw tightened. I should have told you there was a potential threat, given you the chance to be prepared rather than ambushed. I was prepared enough. Something felt wrong immediately. The timing, the approach, the way he tried to use your fears against you. I squeezed his hand. My grandmother used to say that instruments are only as good as the wood you choose. If the material is flawed, no amount of skill can create beautiful sound. Lucian's approach was like that, superficially convincing, but fundamentally wrong once you really listened. You saw through him when I missed the signs for months. You were too close. He was your friend, your partner. That kind of betrayal is harder to see when you care about someone. I thought about Sophia, about his tests and doubts. This is different than what happened with Sophia, isn't it? Completely. Sophia wanted my money. That hurt my pride, but not my heart. Lucian betrayed 20 years of friendship, of trust, of shared history. That cuts deeper than I want to admit. I pulled him against me, letting him rest his head on my shoulder, feeling the tension in his body slowly begin to release. We sat like that for long minutes, the weight of betrayal and relief mixing together. When all this is handled, Dante said eventually, when Lucian's prosecuted and we've secured the business against any remaining threats, I want to renew our vows. I pulled back to look at him. What? The contract expires in a month. The will's requirements will be satisfied, and legally, you could walk away with everything I promised. His dark eyes were intense, vulnerable. I don't want you to leave, Clara. I want to marry you again, properly this time. Not because of legal obligations, but because you're my wife in every way that matters. Because I love you. Because I want to spend the rest of my life with you. That sounds suspiciously like a proposal. It is. The first one was a business proposition. This is me asking you to choose me. Choose us. Choose this life we've built together. Not because you need financial security, or I need to satisfy inheritance requirements, but because we want to be together. I thought about the past 11 months. The gradual shift from strangers to friends to lovers, the shared meals and conversations, the way he'd integrated into my world while welcoming me into his. Thought about how he looked at my finished violins with genuine wonder, how he'd learned to read my moods based on which tools I reached for, how his presence had become essential. Ask me properly. Dante stood, then knelt before me with natural grace that made the formal gesture somehow intimate. He pulled a small box from his pocket. Not the ring I'd been wearing for months, but something new. Clara Reed Volkoff. Will you marry me again? Not because a contract requires it, but because I love you. Because you make me laugh over dumplings and defend me against traitors and show me every day what genuine goodness looks like. Because I want to build instruments and empire and family together. Will you be my wife? Truly and forever? I opened the box to find a ring that took my breath away. Not a massive diamond, but a delicate band inlaid with tiny pieces of wood. Maple, spruce, rosewood, ebony. The materials I worked with daily, transformed into something beautiful. When did you? 2 months ago. I had it custom made by a jeweler who specializes in unusual materials. Each piece of wood came from instruments in your workshop, offcuts you were going to discard. I wanted you to wear something that represented your art, not just my wealth. The thoughtfulness of it, the understanding of what mattered to me, undid something in my chest. Yes, obviously yes. I'll marry you again, Dante. As many times as you want. He slid the ring onto my finger beside my wedding band, then kissed me with a tenderness that promised forever. When we finally pulled apart, both smiling, I rested my forehead against his. For the record, I murmured, this is still the best business decision I ever made. Marrying me? Falling in love with you. 2 weeks after Lucian's arrest, I sat in my workshop at 2 a.m, unable to sleep, running my fingers over wood grain that whispered secrets and patterns only patience could reveal. The viola I'd been commissioned to create rested on my workbench, nearly complete. But something nagged at me, a dissonance between what I'd been told about the commission and what my instincts suggested. The client was Mikhail Antonov, a cellist Dante had introduced me to at a charity gala. Distinguished, charming, with impeccable references and a generous deposit. He'd commissioned the viola for his niece, a promising young musician studying at Juilliard. Everything about the transaction seemed legitimate, except for the small inconsistencies that had been accumulating in my mind like wood shavings, individually insignificant, but collectively forming a pattern. Mikhail's accent shifted subtly between conversations, sometimes more pronounced, sometimes barely present, in ways that suggested performance rather than natural variation. His knowledge of music was extensive but oddly theoretical, lacking the embodied understanding that came from actually playing instruments. He'd asked detailed questions about my schedule, about security at the workshop, about when Dante was likely to be away from home. Questions framed as polite interest, but that now seemed like reconnaissance. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos, finding images from the gala where we'd met. Mikhail standing beside the dessert table, his posture relaxed, but in the reflection of a polished silver urn behind him, I could see his expression when he thought no one was watching. Not charming, not interested in the music program being celebrated, but calculating, assessing. My grandmother had taught me to trust my hands more than my eyes, to listen for truth in resonance rather than appearance. I'd learned to identify instruments by their unique sound signatures, to catch infinitesimal variations in tone that revealed flaws invisible to visual inspection. That same attention to detail, to patterns beneath surface presentation, was now suggesting something wrong about Mikhail Antonov. I opened my laptop and began researching. The references he'd provided checked out superficially, but when I dug deeper, following threads of information with the same meticulous patience I brought to wood selection, inconsistencies emerged. A performance date that conflicted with another documented appearance. A teaching position at a conservatory that had actually ended 2 years before his resume claimed. Small lies, carefully constructed, probably sufficient for casual verification, but crumbling under sustained scrutiny. 3 hours later, as dawn light began filtering through my workshop windows, I had assembled a disturbing picture. Mikhail Antonov existed, was indeed a cellist, but the man I'd met wasn't him. The real Antonov had died in a car accident 6 months ago in Prague, a tragedy barely reported in international news, easily missed unless you were specifically searching. Which meant the man commissioning this viola, the man who'd been asking careful questions about Dante's schedule and my security, the man who had a key to my workshop for approved morning deliveries of materials. That man was an imposter. My hands trembled as I called Dante. It was 6 a.m, Early even for him, but he answered on the second ring. "Clara? What's wrong?" "Mikhail Antonov isn't who he claims to be. The real cellist died months ago. Someone's been impersonating him, and I think—" My voice caught as the implications crystallized. "I think they've been planning something, Dante. He has a key to my workshop. He asked about your schedule. He's been positioning himself perfectly to—" "Stay where you are. I'm calling Adrian and Roman. Don't leave the workshop. Don't let anyone in. I'll be there in 20 minutes. The call ended, and I sat surrounded by my tools and half-finished instruments, understanding with chilling clarity that I'd been played. Someone had spent months earning my trust, learning my routines, gaining access to my space, all while I'd been too focused on my work to see the manipulation. Dante arrived in 15 minutes with a security team. His face was drawn with worry, but when he saw me unharmed, relief softened his expression. "Tell me everything. Every detail about Antonov. Every question he asked. Every inconsistency you noticed." I explained my research, my growing suspicions, the pattern of small lies that had accumulated into probable deception. Adrian listened carefully, taking notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "The timing is suspicious," Adrian noted. "Right after Lucian's arrest, when we'd be focused on securing the business against internal threats, someone inserts himself into your life, gets access to your workshop, learns your schedule, positions himself perfectly for what? Kidnapping? Assassination? Gathering intelligence? We need to find him," Dante said, his voice carrying that cold control I'd only heard a few times before. "And we need to understand who he's working for. This level of preparation suggests significant resources behind him." Over the next 12 hours, Dante's team moved with efficient precision. They tracked the imposter through financial records, surveillance footage, and the careful work of investigators who understood how to find people who didn't want to be found. What they discovered was worse than we'd feared. The man calling himself Mikhail Antonov was actually Alexei Morozov, nephew of the family head Dante had clashed with nearly a year ago. He'd been embedded for months, not to attack directly, but to gather information that would allow the Morozovs to strike at exactly the right moment. The Viola commission was his cover, Adrian explained as we reviewed security footage from my workshop. But his real objective was learning when you'd be vulnerable, when Dante would be distracted, when they could make a move without triggering the full weight of Volkov's security. "Tonight," Dante said, his voice tight. "We've intercepted communications. They're planning to grab Clara tonight, during your usual late work session. Use her as leverage to force me into surrendering business interests." Fear crystallized in my chest, sharp and cold. But beneath it, I felt something else. Fury at being manipulated, at having my kindness and trust weaponized against the man I loved. "Then, let's give them what they expect," I said quietly. Dante turned to me, his expression sharp. "Absolutely not. We're not using you as bait. You're not using me. I'm volunteering. Because if we don't catch them attempting this, they'll just try again. Better to control the situation, to be prepared, than to live waiting for an attack we know is coming. Clara, I'm not some delicate thing that needs protecting from reality, Dante. I'm your wife, your partner, and I'm the one who figured out Alexei was lying in the first place. Let me help finish this." The argument that followed was intense, with Adrian eventually siding with my position despite Dante's objections. "She's right," he said bluntly. "We need to end this, not just delay it. And Clara's the only advantage we have. They think she's unaware of their plan." Finally, reluctantly, Dante agreed. But the price of his agreement was comprehensive security measures. Undercover personnel positioned throughout my workshop and the surrounding blocks, communication devices hidden on my person, and Dante himself monitoring everything from a surveillance van 1 building away. "If anything feels wrong," he insisted, gripping my shoulders with intensity that revealed his barely controlled fear. If you sense any danger I haven't anticipated, you use the panic word. Immediately. No hesitation, no trying to be brave. I promise. That evening, I returned to my workshop as planned, making a show of my usual routine. Lights on at exactly 7:30. Music playing. Vivaldi, my traditional choice for detail work. The careful sounds of tools on wood, the familiar rhythm of my craft. At 9:15, my phone buzzed with the text I'd been expecting. Running late with materials delivery. Will be there in 30 minutes. M.A. I texted back confirmation, then continued working, my hands steady despite my racing heart. Around me, invisible in darkness and surveillance positions, Dante's team waited. At 9:50, I heard the key in my workshop lock, the key I'd given Mikhail months ago for legitimate delivery purposes, now being used for something far darker. The door opened, and Alexei Morozov entered, no longer wearing his charming cellist persona. Two men followed him, both armed, both moving with professional efficiency that suggested military or criminal training. Clara, Alexei said, his accent now completely different. Harder, more Russian, stripped of the musical refinement he'd performed for months. So dedicated to your craft, it's almost admirable. Mikhail. I kept my voice steady, my hands on my tools. You're early. Let's drop the pretense. You know who I am. I know you know. Your husband's surveillance teams have been scrambling all day. He smiled coldly. Did you really think we wouldn't notice? My blood ran cold. They'd known about the surveillance, known we were expecting them. Which meant, the trap isn't for you, Alexei continued, moving closer. It's for Dante. He's watching right now, isn't he? From some nearby location, monitoring your safety, ready to rush in the moment things look dangerous. He pulled out a phone, showing me live surveillance footage. Dante in a van 1 building over, exactly as we'd planned. We've been tracking his team all day, learning his positions, his capabilities, his patterns. He'd outmaneuvered us, turned our trap into his own. My mind raced through options, through possible responses that didn't end with Dante walking into an ambush. What do you want? What I've always wanted. For the Volkovs to understand their place. To accept that this city has hierarchies. They can't simply buy their way past. Alexei gestured, and his men moved to strategic positions, guns drawn. Your husband has 2 choices. He can surrender business interests my uncle has identified, transfer holdings, accept subsidiary status, or he can try to rescue you, and we'll be waiting for him with superior positioning and firepower. There's a 3rd choice, I said quietly. Which is? I could stop him from coming at all. Alexei laughed. You think Dante Volkov would leave his precious wife to be taken? His love for you is his weakness. That's the entire point of this exercise. His love for me is why he'll listen when I tell him to stand down. I reached slowly for my phone, moving carefully to avoid triggering a violent response from Alexei's armed companions. Let me prove it. Alexei considered, then nodded. Go ahead. Call him. Tell him to surrender, to stay away. He won't listen, but I'll enjoy watching him ignore your pleas before we finish this. I called Dante's phone. He answered immediately, his voice tight with controlled panic. Clara, listen to me carefully, I interrupted, putting the call on speaker as Alexei had gestured for me to do. They know about the surveillance. They've positioned for an ambush. If you come for me, people will die. Probably you. I'm not leaving you there. You have to, because there's something more important than rescuing me from this situation. Nothing is more important. Our future is, our family, the life we're building that's actually legitimate, actually good. I kept my voice steady, holding Alexei's gaze while I spoke. You once told me you were terrified of becoming your grandfather, of sliding back into darkness. This is that choice, Dante. You can respond with violence, with force, with old methods that might save me tonight but confirm every terrible thing people whisper about the Volkov name. Or you can choose a different path. Silence on the other end. I could imagine Dante in that van, surrounded by his security team, every instinct screaming at him to storm my workshop and damn the consequences. What path? His voice was barely audible. The legal one. Call Detective Morrison, the one who handled Lucian's arrest. Tell her everything. About the Morozov family's threats, about Alexei's impersonation, about this attempted kidnapping. Let the law handle this, completely and properly. Prove that you're different than your grandfather, that you choose justice over vengeance, even when it's harder. They have guns, Clara. By the time police arrive, I'll be fine, because I'm betting Alexei doesn't actually want to hurt me. That's not the play here. I looked directly at the man who'd spent months pretending to be someone he wasn't. The goal is to provoke Dante into responding with violence, to give you evidence that the Volkovs are still criminals, to undermine everything he's built. But if he doesn't take the bait, if he responds with law and justice and proper process, your entire plan falls apart. Alexei's expression had shifted from confident to uncertain. He'd planned for violence, for confrontation, for Dante's protective fury. He hadn't planned for this. You're bluffing, he said, but doubt colored his voice. No, I'm choosing to trust my husband. To trust that the man I married really is different than his predecessors. That he loves me enough to make the harder choice. I looked back at the phone. Call Detective Morrison, Dante. Trust the system you've been trying to prove you believe in. Show me, show the city, show everyone who doubts you that the Volkov family is truly legitimate now. Another long silence. Then, I love you, Clara. Whatever happens, remember that I love you. I know. That's why this will work. The call ended. Alexei began barking orders to his men, clearly thrown by this unexpected development. They'd prepared for tactical assault, not legal intervention. As they scrambled to reassess, I noticed something Alexei hadn't. The faint sound of sirens in the distance, growing steadily louder. That's Detective Morrison, I said calmly. Dante called her before he even called me. He knew about your surveillance, knew you were listening to his phone. That whole conversation was for your benefit, making you think you'd surprised us, giving you confidence to proceed. Alexei's face went white. You played you, the way you played me for months. I smiled without humor. My husband is many things, but stupid isn't one of them. And neither am I. The workshop door burst open, but not with Dante's security team, with uniformed police officers, Detective Morrison at their front, weapons drawn and orders clear. Alexei and his men were surrounded, outmaneuvered, and facing legitimate criminal charges rather than the shadowy violence they'd prepared for. As they were being cuffed and read their rights, Dante finally entered, moving immediately to me with desperate speed. He pulled me into his arms, and I felt him trembling slightly despite his controlled exterior. That was the most terrifying gamble of my life, he murmured against my hair. If I'd been wrong, if they'd hurt you. But you weren't wrong, and I'm fine. And now the Morozovs are facing federal charges, instead of just territorial disputes. I pulled back to look at him. You chose the right path, Dante. The hard one, the legal one, the one that proves you're actually different. I nearly didn't. Every instinct screamed to come in with force, to prioritize getting you safe over any other consideration. But you didn't, because you're not your grandfather. You're the man who brought me dumplings and learned to identify wood grain by touch, and chose justice over vengeance, even when the woman you love was in danger. I kissed him softly. I'm so proud of you. Detective Morrison approached, her expression professionally neutral but with approval evident in her eyes. "Nice work, Mrs. Volkov. That call bought us the time we needed to position properly. And you were right. They had no intention of actually harming you. The goal was provocation, not violence." "How did you know?" Dante asked. "Because Alexei spent months learning everything about me. My schedule, my habits, my work. If he'd wanted me dead, he had dozens of opportunities when I was genuinely vulnerable. This was theater, designed to force your hand." I looked at the man being led away in handcuffs, his elaborate plan demolished by the simple choice to trust the law. He forgot that sometimes the most powerful response is patience rather than force. Over the next weeks, as Alexei and his accomplices faced prosecution for kidnapping, conspiracy, fraud, and various other charges, the story spread through New York's business community. Dante Volkov, heir to a complicated legacy, had chosen legal process over violent retribution when his wife was threatened, had trusted justice over the old ways his family was known for. It changed something. Not overnight, not completely, but perceptibly. Business rivals who'd been wary began negotiating in good faith. Banks that had hesitated extended more favorable terms. The whispers about the Volkov family shifted from dangerous criminals in expensive suits to formerly problematic family genuinely reforming. And I discovered I was pregnant, nearly 12 weeks along, which meant conception had happened shortly after Dante's proposal to renew our vows. We'd been so focused on the Morozov threat that I'd missed the early signs, attributing exhaustion and nausea to stress, rather than the tiny life taking root. "A baby," Dante whispered, his hand resting gently over my still flat stomach as we lay in bed the night after confirming the pregnancy. "We're having a baby. Are you happy about it?" Terrified and happy in equal measure. His dark eyes found mine. "I want to be a good father, Clara. Better than mine was. More present, more engaged with who they actually are, rather than who I need them to be for business succession." "You'll be wonderful. You've proven you can choose the hard right path over the easy wrong one. That's the most important thing a father can teach." Our vow renewal took place 6 months later, on a mild spring afternoon in the same workshop where I'd first sheltered from the approaching storm of a contract marriage. My grandmother's tools lined the walls, my instruments in various states of completion served as decorations, and the air smelled of wood and possibility. This time, we wrote our own vows. Dante went first, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "Clara, you've taught me that transformation is possible, that someone can grow beyond their inherited shadows if they're brave enough to try. You saw me at my most humiliated, and offered kindness instead of judgment. You married me for practical reasons and stayed because we built something real. You loved me enough to risk your life trusting I'd make the right choice. I promise to spend the rest of my life earning that trust, protecting our family, and choosing justice over vengeance every single day." My turn. I looked at this man who'd gone from stranger to contract husband to genuine partner, whose child I carried, whose hand I would hold through whatever challenges ahead. "Dante, when I accepted your proposal, I thought I was saving my workshop. I didn't realize I was saving myself. From loneliness, from the belief that practical decisions and real love were mutually exclusive. From the idea that I had to choose between my art and my life. You've supported my work while giving me a home. You've been honest about your darkness while choosing to walk in light. You've proven that some things really are worth the cost, including taking a chance on a stranger with kind eyes and a wounded heart. I promise to stand beside you, to trust your choices, to build beauty together in all its forms." Adrian, serving as our witness again, was suspiciously emotional. Isabel didn't even try to hide her tears. And when the officiant pronounced us married, for the second time, but for the first time by genuine choice, Dante kissed me like a man who'd found his home. The reception was small, intimate, held in the workshop surrounded by the tools and materials that had given me purpose long before Dante entered my life. We served dumplings from his favorite Chinatown restaurant alongside catered elegance, symbolizing the blend of worlds we'd created together. "Speech," Adrian called, champagne glass raised. Dante stood, pulling me up beside him. "Most of you know our marriage started as a business arrangement. What you might not know is how Clara transformed that transaction into something real by simply being who she is. Honest, talented, brave enough to risk kindness with strangers, and wise enough to see through betrayal when it mattered most. She's taught me that legitimacy isn't just about legal documents and proper audits. It's about choosing integrity every day, especially when it costs you." He turned to me, his eyes holding mine with intensity that still made my breath catch after 18 months together. "Thank you for taking a chance on a man testing his date, for seeing past his grandfather's shadows, for believing he could choose to be different, for giving him a home, a purpose, and a family worth protecting through justice rather than violence." I raised my own glass, emotion thick in my throat. "Thank you for proving that practical decisions can lead to impractical emotions. That sometimes the right choice is trusting the man you married, even when every instinct screams to do otherwise. And thank you for teaching me that some things really are worth the cost, like creating beauty in a workshop that almost died, like building a life with someone who started as a stranger and became essential." 3 months later, our daughter was born, Isabella Clara Volkov, named for the friend who'd first suggested we were more than our contract specified. She had her father's dark eyes and serious expression, my delicate hands that would someday perhaps shape wood into music. Dante held her with reverent terror. This tiny life we'd created from an arrangement that had become a love story, by choosing trust over cynicism, justice over vengeance, vulnerability over armor. "What do we tell her someday?" he asked softly. "When she asks how we met, how we decided to marry." I thought about that night at Il Sogno, about tiramisu offered in kindness, about a contract signed in desperation and transformed by honesty. The truth, that we made a practical decision that became the best choice either of us ever made, that we started as strangers and became partners by choosing each other every day. That love doesn't always begin with passion. Sometimes it begins with a contract, a kindness, and the courage to trust that something real can grow from unlikely soil. "Like your instruments," Dante said, his finger gently stroking Isabella's tiny hand. "Started as raw wood, transformed through patience and skill and love into something that sings." Exactly like that. Outside my workshop window, the city continued its chaos. But in here, surrounded by tools and family, and the man I'd married twice, once for business, once for love, I'd found something more valuable than any commission could provide. I'd found home. Not in a place or a contract or even a relationship status, but in the daily choice to build something beautiful with someone brave enough to transform himself while supporting my transformation too. The wood shavings drifted slowly to the floor, each spiral a small thing on its own, but collectively forming the foundation of everything that mattered. Isabella yawned, perfect and tiny, unaware that she'd been born from a marriage that began with humiliation in a restaurant and evolved into family through patience, trust, and the recognition that some gambles, the really important ones, require choosing vulnerability over safety, honesty over protection, and love over every practical reason to keep your heart carefully guarded. Dante kissed my forehead, then our daughter's. "Worth the cost?" "Every single thing," I whispered. "Every single day."